The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chairman. Our founding fathers included the Fourth Amendment in our Constitution for a reason: to require probable cause and a warrant before the government and government agents can spy on any of its citizens. Our founding fathers were fed up, and frankly, I think our citizens are fed up with being spied on by the government. I'm here to offer an amendment today that would prevent warrantless surveillance of Americans with many of my colleagues. And I want to mention that this amendment has passed this House, this body, twice previously, once 293 to 123 and another time 255 to 174. It enjoys broad bipartisan support. My co-sponsors are Mr. Jordan, Mr. Rourke, Mr. Amash, Representative Pocan, Representative Nadler, Gabbard, Farenthold, Liu, Issa, Butterfield, Labrador, Gosar, Delbene, Poe, Conyers, Sensenbrenner, and Massie-Lofgren from California, who at this point I would like to yield 2 minutes of my time.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, warrantless bulk collection of U.S. person communications and information was not ended with the USA Freedom Act. Twice in the last 2 years, the House voted overwhelmingly to close two loopholes, but House leadership blocked us. The first backdoor would be shut by prohibiting the search of government databases for information pertaining to U.S. citizens without a warrant. You can get the information, but you have to get a warrant. In October 2011, in a declassified FISA court decision, we learned that tens of thousands of wholly domestic communications, which are not even allowed to be collected under 702, have been collected. We need to make sure that when you look for an American in that database, you get a warrant, as the Fourth Amendment requires. The second door to be shut prohibits the government from coercing companies into weakening security protections by creating backdoors in products to make surveillance easier. What's encryption? It's sophisticated computer code that is the most powerful tool we have for preventing outsiders from gaining entry into digital systems. Encryption protects the power grid, the air traffic control system, and your smartphone. Even if a weakness in encryption is promoted and created with good intentions, it's only a matter of time until a hacker finds and exploits it. Such flaws put data security of every person and business, and really the security of the United States, at risk. Our government should strengthen the technology that protects our privacy and our businesses and our country, not take advantage of it. The Massie-Lofgren Amendment will make America safer. It will defend the Fourth Amendment, and I urge its adoption, and I yield back to the gentleman from Kentucky.
I think the gentlelady from California may inquire as to how much time I have remaining.
2 minutes.
At this point, I'd like to reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserved. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized.
This amendment would impose greater restrictions on the intelligence community's ability to protect our national security and create an impediment to the government's ability to locate threat information already in its possession. Such an impediment, therefore, would put a lot more American lives at risk at both home and abroad. Colleagues, as recent events have tragically reminded us, this issue is critical to our national security. Lawful inquiries can enable an analyst to identify potential terror plots, to identify foreign nations trying to hack into our networks, and to locate foreign intelligence officers spying within our borders, and yes, locate hostage victims. These authorities were fully considered, as they should be, and we'll hear in a moment from Chairman Goodlatte, during the development and the consideration of the U.S. Freedom Act. I'm pleased to yield to my ranking member for 30 seconds.
Simply associate myself with the chairman's remarks. I am opposed to the amendment. I do appreciate the seriousness of people's opinion on both sides of this issue. I'm an appropriator. I don't have a complete allergic reaction to authorizing in an appropriation bill. But given the seriousness of this issue and the complexity of it, I don't think this is the right venue to make that decision. It should be done in the authorizing process. I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to reiterate, all this amendment basically does is reassert the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. All of the tools currently available to our intelligence agencies and those that keep us safe in the United States would still be available. The only thing that changes after this amendment passes is that the warrant is required to search for information on Americans. It's been this way constitutionally since the beginning of our country. We're just trying to reassert that. Let them have all the tools they have today. Just require a warrant if you want to search for information on Americans. At this point, I would like to yield 1 minute. Sorry. I'd like to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is
Mr.
recognized.
Chairman, I'd like to recognize a member of the Intelligence Committee, Mr. Stewart of Utah, for 90 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I rise today to oppose the Massey Amendment and the inaccurate accusations that underlie it. And let me restate that. The supposition of this amendment is based off a fundamental misunderstanding of intelligence operations. Contrary to rumors, it is illegal to use 702 surveillance authorities to spy on Americans. It is subject to multiple layers of oversight, and Section 702 is an extremely powerful tool that has proven effective in disrupting terror plots, including, for one example, the 2009 plot to bomb New York City subway. If this amendment were in effect today, the intelligence community would be unable to query 702 database for the names of the Orlando nightclub attacker, for his wife, or even the nightclub itself. We should be focusing on thwarting terror attacks, not on thwarting the ability of intelligence professionals to investigate and to stop them. I urge members to prioritize the safety of U.S. citizens and to reject false allegations. And let me say that one more time. False and irresponsible allegations of government spying on Americans. We can scarcely afford to hamstring our intelligence community as it investigates these horrific shootings and tries to prevent similar plots from reaching fruition. All of us want to protect our privacy and our constitutional rights. I want to protect our privacy and our constitutional rights. But objections to intelligence operations must be based on facts and not rumors or misunderstandings. Limiting access to critical law enforcement tools to stop these plots would directly put Americans in danger. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Kentucky is, gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, how much time do I have?
1¼ minutes.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd like to introduce into the record a letter from the Director of the National Intelligence Agency that shows that Americans are being spied on without a warrant using the 702 program.
That will be covered under general leave.
And at this time, I'd like to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, who has the right to close?
The gentleman from New Jersey has the right to close.
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to yield 30 seconds to my colleague from Texas, Judge Poe.
The gentleman is recognized.
Our government spies on Americans. 702 was designed to go after the bad guys overseas, but it is being used to collect communications of Americans in America without a search warrant under the Fourth Amendment. The amendment that the gentleman from Kentucky has introduced does something very basic. It says the Fourth Amendment will apply to the 702A. If you got a search warrant, go see a judge like I used to be, and you have probable cause, then let a judge sign it. And if you don't have probable cause, then you don't get a warrant. That's all it does. It says the Constitution must apply to Americans, and fear tactics, I'm sorry, on the other side, don't change the facts. Get a warrant if you have probable cause. That's all the gentleman from Kentucky's amendment does, and I yield back to him.
Gentleman yields.
To the judge's point, I would say that This doesn't take any tools away from those that want to investigate what happened in Orlando, none whatsoever. That's a mischaracterization, complete mischaracterization of this amendment. You obviously can get a warrant on the perpetrator of this crime, so it would be wrong to characterize it in the way that it's been characterized. And it's unfortunate that my colleagues would take advantage of that situation to try and motivate people to vote no against this bill or this amendment. I urge my colleagues to vote yes against this amendment. It doesn't take away any of the tools. Read the amendment. You'll find out. Just get the warrant. Do the search. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Kentucky yields. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, before I yield my time, how much time do we have?
2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to yield my time to the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Goodlatte.
The gentleman
Of my time.
is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the chairman of the subcommittee. The tragic mass shooting in Florida Sunday morning is but the latest in a string of terror attacks here in America. And sadly, these plots have not been carried out by foreign terrorists, but by Americans against Americans on American soil. We are all searching for the same answer. What motivated Omar Mateen to kill? Investigators are still combing through evidence to determine whether Mateen was in contact with known or suspected terrorists. This amendment prohibits the government from searching data already in its possession collected lawfully under Section 702 of FISA to determine whether Omar Mateen was in contact with foreign terrorists overseas. Despite the characterization by proponents of the amendment that a search could occur if the government has obtained a FISA or criminal probable cause-based order, the exception does not, in fact, authorize such a query. Section 702 and the other provisions of the FISA Amendments Act are not set to expire until December 31 of next year. The House Judiciary Committee shares the concerns of all here that we protect all Americans' rights under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. The committee has engaged and will continue to be engaged in robust oversight of the programs operated under the Act. A floor amendment to a spending bill debated for 10 minutes is not the appropriate venue for Congress to alter our intelligence gathering capabilities. This complicated issue must be closely examined and appropriately vetted by the committees of jurisdiction. Sunday's deadly attack proves once again that the terror threat has not dissipated. The FBI has roughly 1,000 active ISIS probes in the United States, and these are probes into those we know about. Now is not the time to block the use of a critical investigative tool. And I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I thank the gentleman for yielding.
The gentleman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Kentucky. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Kentucky will be postponed.